Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the stream. I'm Ian Douglas. I'm the author of this website, Tech Interview Guide, and today we are joined by Mike Elsmore, aka UK Mad LZ or LZ. Um, Throwback to a gamer tag, as I understand, Mike. So hello, thanks for spending some time with us today. Good to have you.
Happy time zone to everybody here. I am so old and tooth I've given up trying to say good morning or evening, etc.
Right. Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Yeah, it's just happy time zone. That's a good one to use. I think I'll steal that
Yeah, I prefer it over the sounding like a talk show host.
one. That's great. So when you came up with this gamer tag, was it like Mad LZ like landing zone? Like were those the kinds of games that you were playing to come up with that kind of chat
No,
handle or
actually, it evolved from another handle that I couldn't get hold of. So originally, I was addicted to the Mad Max trilogy of movies.
okay.
But as the internet became more and more filled with humans, less than it is today, I couldn't get hold of that handle, so I switched to LZ, and LZ happens to sound a little bit like Elsmore.
Ah, okay. All right. Bit of
There's a
a bit
little
of a
bit of an
play on.
insider note there.
All right, good to know. Good to know. First time chat from a typical rainbow. Good to have you along for the ride. Give you some blinky lights and hello. So thanks for hanging out with us today. So Mike is DevRel at a company called InfoSum. We've got
Hmm.
the chatbot. We'll drop that in chat every now and then. If you're curious, you can do bang guest, and you'll get all the links. Zooey, good to see you in chat as well. Clever play on the username. He says. Good deal. So, Mike, wanted to have you on the stream, partly because you're a streamer, partly because I hang out on your stream from time to time. Sometimes I just lurk and just listen in, because you tend to stream in my morning. And so you kind of get my morning going a little bit with what I like to call learning in public. And I have a lot of respect for people that are willing to just put themselves out there and show other people, like, this is what I'm building and this is my process. And I have a ton of respect for people that are willing to do that and just be their genuine selves, whether that's goofy or silly or serious and whatever. And lots of good conversation on your stream as well. So give everybody a big thumbs up recommendation. Go give Mike a follow here on Twitch if you're watching on Twitch. If you're watching on YouTube later, we'll put all these links in the description later. But feel free to like and subscribe and leave any comments down below, and I'll pass them along to Mike as well. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about your journey in tech. So, right now you're doing developer relations, similar to the kind of work that I do that people on my stream have heard me go on and on about. We'll get into that maybe just briefly for those that are new to that. But tell us about your journey into tech. Like, how did all that start?
Well, first, I'm going to say thank you very much for saying such kind words about my streams, even though I personally feel they are a train wreck. I do them because of the fact that I find them entertaining for myself, let alone anybody else. And I just realized I said myself, not myself. Oh, it's an interesting day here. It's way too warm for my brain to function properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
you're going through
yes,
like crazy heat wave over there. What is it? It's like 31 Celsius or something right now.
yeah, it's like you talk to anybody who lives in Nevada, etc., and that's super cold. It's like, not for us. We're used to cold here and wet. Give us the warm and we all die.
Yep.
Um, uh, anyway, shall we skip past the me griping and moaning like a traditional British person, back to the question at hand, which is, well, if I remember correctly,
Tell us about you.
tell me about me, which I am not going to lie, I am unfortunately horrible about describing myself. And I mean awful. Um, one of those people that's like, I'm quite proud of my past, but I'm also really not wanting to sound condescending to anything. Um, I have been a software engineer, give or take, for 14 years now. I'm one of the people who did not enter university coding on an Amstrad machine and learning to program before they were 18. I actually entered university doing astrophysics.
Oh, cool.
And it turns out when you do the first year of astrophysics in the UK, it turns out to be just a heck of a lot of maths.
Okay.
Um, Surprisingly, I really don't like maths.
Right there with you.
So I ended up doing a combination degree of international history and computer science for my degree. So I
Cool.
have a really weird entry where, surprisingly, I did not learn all the fundamentals of being a software engineer. but I still had the degree that meant people would hire me.
Okay.
It's a very strange start.
So how does that play in with the interview where you've got the degree but maybe you don't interview well because you don't have all the knowledge or all the practice? Like how did that play out in your first couple of jobs?
Ironically, my very first job, I was bloomin' lucky in the fact that I entered just at the point of the recession. So I
Mhm.
was young blood that was moldable.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to pay for senior engineering, etc. At that point because this was 2008 during the last, I believe, global
Yep.
recession we had.
Yep.
So companies were desperate for software engineering to be able to like actually build stuff, but they also weren't willing to pay for good engineers. So instead, they paid for mediocrity and people like me who had no idea what they were bloody doing.
Well, I've,
So I
I've
got
been through
real.
I've been through two of them now. So I went through the one in 2001 as well, and it was the same kind of thing. When that happened, everybody was like, "We need to pay as little as possible," and and we see the salaries kind of creep up, and then 2008 hit, and the salaries kind of came back down, and it kind of came back up, and I think we're at another one of those tipping points where I think we're gonna see the salaries drop a little bit before it'll
Uh,
like pick back up again.
I believe so as well, which
Yeah,
is where I believe boot campers are going to actually have a strong start in comparison to
yeah, for
graduates
sure,
this time,
for sure.
um, which is a topic we'll probably cover later, I'm assuming.
Yeah, sure.
Uh, but yes, no, my entry into it was purely by luck. I was good enough and could do the technical testing side, but I wasn't good enough to get one of the big, grandiose grad jobs at somewhere like IBM, etc. So I
Okay.
ended up working at a PR agency doing web engineering for them.
Okay. Did you use like any of your technical skill and technical ability in that role? Like what was that first role like really like what were you actually doing?
No, this is a very weird thing to describe because I like the vast majority of people who went for a software engineering degree spent a lot of time heavy on Java and core concepts around that sort of stuff. Um, I actually went for my first job in PHP, which I self-taught for my
Hmm.
as part of my final dissertation. So in reality, my PHP was terrible. It was if I had seen my PHP as a senior engineer now, I would have asked somebody to go back and code review it.
Okay, Mike, to be fair, in 2008 PHP was pretty garbage all on its own. So I wouldn't blame your quality of code on you. It
But
was it
it,
was a
it never
horrid language. I was using it back when like version 3 was in beta. So I started PHP back in
we
1998 and it didn't get
Christ.
better until version 7 came out. So, like once version 7 came out, it was a much better language. I'm glad they skipped version 6 and went from 5 to 7 cuz even up to 5 they're like trying to shoehorn in like, well, we didn't mean for this to be an object oriented language, so we'll like keep shoehorning all this stuff in. They're like, "All right, F it. We're just going to like scrap the whole thing. We're going to rewrite the whole language and we'll make PHP
Yeah,
7." And it's a much better language now.
it is a far
Yeah.
better language now. All for the hate that PHP gets, and I'm not going to lie, even on my own streams, I throw shade at PHP for comedy value. It is a far better language now than it ever has been
Right, right.
previously. But no, surprisingly, the actual being taught the fundamentals of language construction and all that jazz did nothing. Absolutely nout for my degree.
Mm.
Sorry, nout is a very British thing, meaning nothing at all.
Nothing.
Uh, uh, what actually saved me was the advanced database design concepts they taught. How
Interesting.
to
Okay.
do large amounts of data management, because at that time, we were just getting into the point of MySQL becoming a huge part and like a core part of the LAMP stack. Just before Postgres became the big dog in the database world, which happened what 2010, 2011, where it suddenly became the go-to replacement for MySQL.
Hmm.
Um, so all these more Oracle big style design principles were what saved me because my degree was missing certain things like neural network design, advanced robotics, any of the things that would have been high algorithmic design principles that you would have
Hmm.
learned to go and work in somewhere like a bank where you had to have algorithmic design as a core of how you actually learned to program. I missed all that.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to kind of see how those things happen. And then, of course, Oracle ended up buying MySQL in what 2010 or something like that.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I
it's
think that may
interesting
have
to
been
kind
the
of see that.
downside of MySQL.
Yeah, but at the same time, like around the same time, everybody's like, "Oh, NoSQL is the way to go," and like Mongo took off, and like everybody starts moving everything to Mongo, which was not the right tool for a lot of applications, but it was kind of the flavor of the
Uh,
month, as we say. And everybody and their uncle started porting everything over to MongoDB, and then the the poor MongoDB developers are like, "We didn't plan for this either." And just watching them scramble to make things scalable and resilient and whatever, because people were losing like I remember reading stories of people losing like tens and hundreds of gigabytes of data on their MongoDB because they were just loading it all in there, and then like one little glitch happens and they lose the entire database and they don't have a good backup, you know. So
no, the
yeah,
horrible
it's
thing, I know exactly what you're talking about, is before the wildfire engine they had developed, and it was a buffer overload issue where you would store all the information, it would hit the edge of the buffer and dump everything before writing it to disk.
right. Yeah, good
And
times, good times.
the amount of people that lost gigs of data on these big boxes. Oh god, yeah, I remember
Hmm.
that exact. Oh, I'm sorry. And this points out that we're both old.
That's no secret on my stream that that I've been around a minute, so it's all good.
But yeah, so the beginning of my degree was very atypical in entering the industry through a degree,
Mhm.
but my degree itself was mostly useless.
Gotcha.
Which is, I still stand by the fact that most of my degree is useless, except the database design stuff, which put me in a very strong place for the first 6 years of my degree.
Hmm.
Sorry, 6 years of my degree, six
Of
years of
your
my
career.
career.
Yeah. That's interesting, and I've talked about this on the stream quite a bit. Of like, is it worth going and getting a CS degree or going to a boot camp? Like we got lots of folks in chat right now, Atypical Rainbow and Zooey and others that tend to come by that either are currently attending a boot camp or going through something like 100 Devs, or
Hmm.
they've been to some kind of like coding program, whether it's an extended program or a relatively short program, and asking like, how do I even compete with someone who has a CS degree? And I typically tell them, you've been sort of shaped and formed for a completely different kind of role than somebody who's gone through a CS or a computer engineering type of degree, where they're going to understand a lot more about like the lower level coding and like how the computer's actually like moving that data around and doing things at that very low, like highly optimized kind of level, where you're sort of poised now to go build full applications using all these tools. And so they're the ones building the tools, you're building the application on those tools or using those tools. And so you're kind of competing for a very different kind of role. But I think a lot of employers haven't quite caught on to that fact yet. So here in America, for example, there's still so many companies that are saying you have to have a CS degree or comparable degree, like actual like 3-4 year college or university, in order to get a programming job doing HTML and CSS and JavaScript. It's like, no, they really don't. Like they truly don't need to have a degree. What's it like over in the UK? Are there degree requirements on jobs over there? Like what's the job market like over there?
I would love to say that you're totally wrong, and everybody is actually evaluated on their merit, etc. However, that's not the case over here. There is still a weird requirement on having a degree for a lot of jobs. There was a factoid I learned quite a few years ago when I started working with boot camps back in 2017, I think 2016, and it was the vast majority of engineering resource in Europe is in the SME, so the small to medium enterprise. So companies less than 500 people. So engineering teams of 0 to 50 people. And instead of evaluating people on what they can do, they evaluate them on the paper they receive, which is such a shame because the vast majority of these companies are web agencies or companies focused around producing things for end clients where the, the actual level of complexity is relatively simple in comparison to these hardcore subjects that degrees actually try and teach. Degrees try and teach you very high level thinking, neural networking, cybersecurity, the vast majority of which does not apply to a day to day engineering job.
Well, I wonder. sorry to interrupt real quick. I wonder if that's just to kind of say like these are the possibilities. Now you
Mm,
can go explore. So it's not that you're going to go find one role that's doing a little bit of all of those things, but I think it's at
yeah.
least sort of whetting your appetite for like you could go down this road, you could go down this road, you could go down that road. And maybe it's just to spark that interest or to say like, you know what, I'm not interested in that particular avenue. I'm not going to bother like going further in that particular study.
I must admit, I have a very much more cynical view on that, which is
Fair.
universities are just trying to sell themselves, so they try and sell the interesting stuff rather than the things you actually do for a day job.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Like the vast majority of day job work is ETL, expand, transform, and loading information from point A to point B. It just happens to be, depending on what you're doing, it has a fancy UI in the middle doing multiple processes.
Interesting. Yeah.
I'm a very cynical old man.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Lots of stuff going on in chat. So Fool Snable was talking about how like getting a degree over in Europe, at least where they live, is free aside from cost of living. But also mentioning like you probably also need to grind on leak code. And yeah, I think there is going to be some amount of leak code in the interview process, just because our interview process is one where we have to demonstrate what we know how to do. And Mike, one of the things that I say on the channel a lot is like, you never hear of a doctor going to apply for a job at a hospital where they say go operate on that person, and if they live, you get the job. Like, there's like, all right, you're a doctor, you're hired. Like, if you need a job, like we need a doctor. That's enough.
I'm
Because
quite
for what
lucky.
for what we do, we're not like we don't have licensing, we don't have any sort of like credentialing or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm quite lucky. In the entire time I've been interviewing for jobs in the software space, there's only been one company that's ever made me do theoretical computer science on a whiteboard. High level, problem solving on a whiteboard rather than actually trying to solve a problem. Just an FYI, that was Spotify.
Really interesting.
Yes, they were the only company that flew me out to Sweden to then fill out a bunch of whiteboard exercises. It was very weird.
Yeah, that's kind of strange. So so your first couple of jobs were like around the data space and so on. Where did it progress from there?
Mhm. Weirdly enough, I found out I liked monkeying around with data. I'm actually, I'll admit right now, I am nowhere good enough to be a DBA or somebody who is a data scientist or a data analyst. However, taking data and doing a thing with data is something that I've always loved. So every job up until 2020 was involved with doing stuff with data. So that's a solid 12 years of monkeying around with stuff. Every job has either been in business analytics or in high level processing of data, or for 2 to 3 years nearly, where I was a developer advocate specifically around open source data systems
Interesting.
and
So is
teaching
that
people on different stuff.
is that what we would call like data pipelines, where you're kind of building those ETLs where you're like pulling data in on one side and you're doing some sort of transformation and sending it back out the other side? Like, would you classify that as kind of data pipelining?
Kind of,
Okay.
because data pipelining is very much a single direction process.
Mhm.
Data pipeline has always been you make A go to B and you do a bit in the middle,
Right.
rather than it synchronizes and whatnot. I've always been in the realm of making things go backward and forward and do possible weird tricks in the middle, like
Okay.
do a kickflip. Um, I know that's very weird to say, but it's the reason why I fell in love with data systems when I was at IBM. So I was originally hired as a developer advocate for CouchDB, which
Hmm.
is a little database that most people have considered to be a toy for the last 10 years, but
It
I
was
loved
it,
it because I had an HTTP endpoint.
it was actually my very first NoSQL database back
Ah,
in 2000, early 2010, and into 2011. I was using CouchDB at
okay.
a gaming company. Yep.
In 2014, I got hired by a company called Cloudant to be their developer advocate around CouchDB, which
Yeah.
at that time was a multi-master HTTP only document store database, and we got acquired by IBM. So I then ended up learning about a whole bunch of extra data systems on top of that. So indexing systems like Elastic, uh, very early releases of Kafka for data pipelines.
Yep.
Like, but this wasn't just like taking data and smushing it into one place. It was genuinely making it useful and doing stuff with it as well. And I love doing that. And I'm very lucky to have spent most of my career around that. Even in my my current role is focused on that as well.
Yep. Very cool. Very cool.
So I'd say yes, pipelines, but I took advantage of being a DevRel and learning how to make it do a trick and throw it backwards as well.
Right. So how did this transition then into getting DevRel roles? Because you did DevRel in the past. You're back to doing DevRel. So similar path to me, where you weren't doing DevRel, then you got into DevRel, and then you did something else, and you came back to DevRel. What's it been like for you? Like, what's your experience in developer relations, or maybe for those that are joining us, like, what is DevRel when we talk about developer relations?
Well, I'm not going to describe DevRel. I'll leave that to you if you say one to it, because it is
it's a lot of things to a lot of people. It's like saying, "Oh yeah, I work in DevOps."
In DevOps is a mentality rather than the job itself.
Yeah.
It's a rabbit hole upon itself. There, as far as I know now, there are like 4 different core areas of developer relations, and that causes a mess upon itself. But I will describe how the hell I got there. So you're probably aware, and some of the older people in chat will be aware of this, of the hackathon scene from 2008 to 2012. There was a strong student hackathon side in the US. So most of the New York universities used to do it. Organizations in the early 2010s, like SendGrid, etc., were massive into helping and organizing hackathons.
Yeah, we did a lot of those.
Yep. And I am blessed in the fact that I went to my first hackathon in Amsterdam in 2012 called King of Code. And it was a conference and hackathon series ran by Sam Verma, who's a good friend of mine now. And I realized, you know what? These are fun. That's why I then went to a couple more in the UK. One based in London called Hacked.io. Another one called Leeds Hack, which is in the north of England. Give or take, that's about 200 miles between the two. I have lived for a lot of my time in... chat's just reminded me 2012 was a decade ago now.
Yeah, they're outing us for being old, I think.
They buggered me. Anyway, so I lived in Birmingham, which is the second city of the country, and in slap bang in the middle. And I gave a talk on this actually many years ago at HackCon, which ended up being called "Angry is a Good Reason to Do Anything."
All right.
I got so annoyed at having to travel out of the country or plus 50 miles just to go to a simple hackathon. So back in 2013, I ran my own one-day conference and hackathon for 3 days called Hackference. There are probably very few people. I think I may have seen Cassidy was in there, and I believe she'd heard of it but never actually had the chance to attend, which is a shame for her. It was a series of events, and I ended up getting hired because I was so ingrained in this hack scene. So much so that there's a gentleman called Joe Nash who ended up making a graph of the lineage of European hackathons. And between an event called Hacked.io and Hackference, it seems to have spawned, I think it was like 70% of the hackathons in Western Europe.
Wow.
Just because of the timing of when we did it. So I ended up in DevRel, not because I actually was really good at teaching or anything else. It was because I was involved in this really niche core scene of things at the time, back in 2013 through to 2016.
Interesting.
That's the reason why I got in. I have no idea why I'm still here. Oh, no, I'm very aware. I like teaching people. I like being on stage, and I like learning things in public and sharing them. I like making a train wreck of my own stuff and it's still being entertaining.
Yep, good times. Yeah, so go give Mike a follow if you're here on Twitch. I will drop all these links on YouTube. Oops, wrong guest, not Twitch. So yeah, you can get all of Mike's links here. So what days and what times do you typically stream? Like, are you an everyday streamer, occasional streamer?
It's a more occasional. It is a Monday, Wednesday, Friday thing, where Mondays and Wednesdays are actually trying to solve a problem, and Friday I throw it just, I feel like coding with a beer.
Yeah, fair enough. Good deal. So you mentioned boot camps earlier, and before we came
Yes.
on stream, you were talking about how you actually work with some boot camps, and we've got
Yes.
a few people in chat, and they were actually asking about like boot camps and boot camp experience and so on. When you work with folks at different boot camps, and I'm curious if you work with Scrimba because I just did a podcast with Scrimba recently. Um, what kind of advice do you give folks coming out of boot camps when it comes to job preparation and how to get ready for jobs? Like what types of talks and so on do you give it at these boot camps?
Most of the ones I've given at boot camps have been either around data system design, because the vast majority of boot camps I have been involved with have all been around building around one specific stack. Either it's been the mean stack or it's been a C# derived stack, which unfortunately pigeonholes skill set for exit. So I've normally gone in and given talks on either different data systems, so that it's less of a culture shock when they have to learn something new when they go to interviewing, or on DevOps processes, because weirdly enough, I like DevOps tooling.
Cool.
It's weird. I like underlying data things for some reason. And I've given principal talks on things like how monitoring and observability work, so that once again, it's less of a culture shock when you enter the career space. I have given a couple of career talks before, and I've realized I am not the person to give those career talks, because very early in my career, I actually tried chasing the money. I actually went to become an SEO specialist.
Okay.
Turns out that was a bad choice, because when you're an SEO specialist, you don't build stuff, you tell other people to build stuff. And it's really not as interesting. But you chase the money, and that turns out to be a bad choice.
Interesting. As well, I have seen like SEO groups because I get those spam messages all the time. They're like, "Hey, we'll come in and we'll do the work, and then like you just pay us, money or whatever for it." So I guess nowadays there are SEO roles where you actually go in and like optimize what they build and so on. But so when you mentioned like chasing the dollar, and how that really didn't work out. So what kind of path, I guess, would you suggest for people like that are thinking about getting into tech and they're not sure what kind of role they want to do? Like, how would you advise them to figure out like what do you want to do with these superpowers that you've got now that you know how to program? Like, what do you want to go do with that?
Oh, that's a toughie, because that is like saying which of the 1 billion different combinations of role do you want to do for the rest of your life? In reality, I have done in the past 14 years 4 career changes.
Okay.
I've gone from being a full stack engineer through to being a SEO technical specialist, to be back to an engineer, to going into DevRel, to then going to lead engineer, and back to DevRel.
Interesting. Okay.
So I don't think there is a way to find out what you love other than trying to practice what you preach.
Okay.
Which, if you love interaction design, trying to work with people who are fantastic at behavioral design and UI UX flows. If you are a data nerd like myself, just messing around with different data systems and data warehouses and having fun and seeing what you can build.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's I don't know about you, but I don't think there is a surefire way to find the thing that you love other than getting stuck in.
That's fair. I think to be clear though, like we don't have to tell people like, hey, if you're going to a boot camp, you have to know it. Like you have to figure out the rest of your career. I think just taking a step and say, I'm gonna try this, and then
Yes.
figuring out from there, like where do I want to go from there. So it's a path, right? It's like it's
Yes.
this open field that you can just like wander and make your own path. You don't have to follow anybody else's path, and you can start wherever you want to start. If you've got an interest or desire to work in one particular area, go chase that area. Once you're there, you might realize like, yeah, this is what I'm meant to be. This is what I'm meant to do. It took me a long time to get to that in my career. Or you might realize really early on, it's like, you know what? I thought I was going to enjoy mobile development, and turns out I don't, because things are changing all the time, and I want like a platform that's not going to change quite as much. So I'm going to go do some research, and now I'm going to go off in this direction instead. And so you don't have to have it all figured out.
Yeah.
I think it's important to explore lots of options, and it's a lot easier to do that when you have that first job. It gives you the sort of the stability to then go look at other things that potentially you want to go do. But getting that first job, sometimes it feels like I'll just literally take any kind of job. Like I just, I've gone through this boot camp, I've spent a bunch of money, or maybe the boot camp was free, but I need to pay them back, and so like whatever I get, I don't care. I just need any kind of job, and then I'll figure it out from there. And that's okay too. Your first job doesn't have to be your dream job, and it doesn't have to be your forever job. And in the tech industry, it's not going to be a forever job. You're going to be changing those jobs every 2-3 years anyway.
Yeah, but there used to be an old adage when I entered the industry, which was when you join a job, you're going to be there for the rest of your life.
Hmm.
And it was, or the other one was, if you join a big corporation, you're never going to lose your job.
Yeah,
Uh,
both of those are
which
completely false.
they are completely false. But it
Yeah.
is an adage that surprisingly a lot of people still think is valid and works today. I'm literally just looking at my CV and looking at in 14 years, I've had 10 jobs.
Yeah.
Some of those are because the company has laid off large amounts of its workforce. Others are because I personally didn't fit the organization. And
Hmm.
that does happen,
Sure.
unfortunately, for some people.
Yeah.
Um, Now, what was it? I was told as a phrase, there's no such thing as loyalty in technology anymore,
Hmm.
which
Was
is
there ever?
I think the problem is there used to be where people would join an organization and that's where they would be for 15 plus years.
Hmm.
Um, and unfortunately, that adage came from there. So
Yeah.
there is nothing wrong with entering job one, realizing either it doesn't work for you as a person, you haven't found what you wanted to do. There is nothing wrong with taking what you know and moving on to the next place
Yep.
at
This is
all.
true. Yep. Absolutely true. Handful of things going on in chat here. Got a long message
Oh,
from Driftwood saying, I went to a boot camp. It forever changed my life. The first year was not the best pay, but not the worst. Did a MERN stack, which is Mongo, Express, React, and Node. Went from being a teacher, having a master's in teaching, to now making more than I ever would after 30 years with a doctorate. Wow. I would say it's about the effort you put into the boot camp, the grind, the grit, the determination, the shutting off, and focusing for 6 months. And thanks to a talk with Ian about how to discuss compensation, landed a 20% raise. Yeah,
wait.
there you go. Get that money. Do what you love what you do. And sometimes it's hard to figure out what you're going to love. I've worked with a
Yes.
lot of people from boot camps where it's like, I wanted to leave that industry to go get into tech. It's like your easiest way into tech is to go back to that industry, even though you've left it. So, maybe you came from the finance industry and now you want to be a programmer. Your easiest job to find is going to be back in the financial sector because that's your background. You already know that, and you're bringing that value with you with these new skills. It doesn't mean that you have to go back to that role in, accounts receivable. But because you understand what that entailed and you understand what the user experience is around that software, go apply for a job at the software company for the software that your old company used to use. Like, just say like, hey, I used to work at that company, we used your software, now I want to come work for you and help be a part of that software. That's going to be your easiest way back into tech. And even if you don't enjoy it, that's okay. Do it, like, push through it for 6 months to a year, get that first little bit of experience. I guarantee you, like, once you get like a year and a half, 2 years of that first job experience, anybody will hire you at that point. As long as you're showing that progression and skill, and that you're developing your skill further, as soon as you have that professional experience, literally recruiters are going to be beating down your door to get your attention.
True. I'm going to leave you with chat for a moment. There is somebody knocking on my door very aggressively,
Yeah,
so much so that they've
no
set
worries.
off my ring doorbell.
All right, sounds good.
1 second.
Let's see what else we had going on. I'm now a Salesforce dev with Lightning Dev components. That's awesome. Thanks for the follows, SH3G5. Not sure, Shegs maybe in LeetCode, and Vilser. Appreciate the follows. If
Welcome, Professor.
if finite singularity is still around, my Tau keeps crashing on me, and I'm not sure why. Otherwise, my lights would be blinking for you back here in the background, but apparently I've broken something in my Tau bot that I will need to go check later. I mean, Tau is working. Tau is working fine, but um, the Tau bot that I have that tells my lights to flash is suddenly crashing. It's telling me that something with WebSockets, so I'm not sure. It's actually not Tau. Now that I look at the error dump in Python, it's not Tau. It's the OBS WebSocket trying to connect that's giving it issues. Let me comment some of that out and see if that'll help.
There we go. Sorry about
Try that
that.
again.
The joys of deliveries and the fact that I have now had 2 things sent back to Germany by mistake.
Oh no. Well, hopefully.
But yes, no, you know what? I was just literally thinking whilst you were talking through Driftwood's backstory. I was going, you know what I've discovered in all the years that I have been in teaching, speaking, interacting with people. The greatest thing for finding out what you want to do next is having the opportunity to play with stuff and doing what you feel like you want to do.
Mhm.
Boot camps are brilliant for that in the fact that they try teaching you the vast majority of boot camps anyway. There are some specialist boot camps in there. They try focusing in on a full stack. So the traditional 3 layers of database, you have your interaction, your application, and your data storage layer. And that is brilliant. A degree gives you all the fundamentals around all those things, but not a thing to play with. You learn those in your first job with a degree. I don't know if that was the same for you, Ian, where you came into the industry and, oh, I'll learn how to glue these concepts together myself then.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, also when I graduated back in the day, we didn't really have revision control. I mean, we did kind of, but it was very, very rudimentary. It was like, I think we actually called it CVS back then, and it has
Version
progressed.
control with a folder in FTP. So
yeah, well, that's typically like my first couple of jobs. It was like, we're gonna date stamp this script. Like, we'll actually put the date in the file name, and then we make like symbolic links. Well, actually, we figured out later that we can just make symbolic links and replace the symbolic link and then restart the server. You don't have to shut the server off, rename the script, and then start the server up again. So yeah, all the little tips and tricks from back in the day. But it's like, wait, it used to work last Tuesday. Just go roll back to last Tuesday's build. It's like, really?
yeah,
we're a lot more robust about it now. So
the opportunity is more to just be able to get your hands into stuff.
yeah.
The vast majority of companies that you will work for, regardless of scale, will always let you tinker with stuff outside of your core role, as long as it doesn't get in the way of what they're paying you to do.
True. Yep.
So
yeah, most companies are really open if you want to explore other stuff. You just got to ask and let them know what you're interested in. My job as your manager is to make sure that I can make those opportunities happen. If you've got an interest in something and I can make that happen, I'll make it happen. So
now that's an entirely separate topic that I feel very strongly around, which is the vast majority of management in and around engineering organizations is terrible. Either it's engineers who've been, they can only progress in the company by taking management responsibility, which for some engineers is absolutely the wrong thing to do because they are not managers. They are fantastic engineers. They can build, design complex systems that only beings of a higher level can process. But they're awful managers. And yeah, like, you need to have a clear line of communication with those people in, brutally honest, when you're an organization, in control of your destiny.
Right.
And actually making sure your desires are clearly known. I want to learn as a React dev Svelte because I know for a fact that that's going to become the thing we need to do in 2 years' time. We are writing RESTful APIs. Can we please allow some research time onto GraphQL as a principle of something we will need to learn for different interaction systems? 90% of the time, just asking solves that problem.
Yeah.
But the managers will not think about telling you to do it to begin with.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's a dark thing to say, but unfortunately, it is very true for a lot of engineering organizations.
Yeah. Scrolling back on chat a little bit, Driftwood says, thanks for the shout outs and so on. Thanks for the guidance and direction on how to even approach an awkward conversation. Really, I'm thankful to spread the word about the stream and what he's doing to help. Someone said, Driftwood sold me on watching Ian stream for the long haul. Now I want an extra 20K. I mean, it's possible. I mean, go like, so what I recommended, and this actually happened, not too long ago, is someone asked an anonymous question. And if you're ever curious about asking a question in my chat, you can always send a whisper over to my bot, and it'll show up in chat as an anonymous question. So if you don't want your name on it, you can ask that way.
Nice.
But someone came through and asked an anonymous question of like, I've taken on more responsibility. I want to talk to my manager about getting more pay for that. What do I do? And the advice I gave on the stream was tell your manager you want to have a conversation in a couple of weeks about your compensation. That gives them time to like get their ducks in a row and figure out like, okay, what's my budget and so on. And their boss emailed them like within 5 minutes going, yeah, I just approved a raise. You're good. Like, we don't even need to have that conversation. And they wrote me back and they're like, I didn't even have to sit in that awkward conversation. I just told them I want to have a conversation and got the raise. I think in today's economy right now, companies are a lot more willing to retain their talent than to have to go rehire somebody because it's so expensive to hire new people. And it's such a long, drawn out process. They would rather pay a little bit more salary and keep you on staff. I was in someone else's chat the other day. It might have been Finite Singularity's chat where someone was saying like, my laptop is always crashing and I want to quit my job. It's like, just talk to your boss about getting a new laptop. Like if I can spend $2,000 on a new laptop, I would rather do that than spend $20,000-$30,000 to hire somebody new. And now I've got to teach them all over again. Like, I would rather just buy you a new laptop and make you productive. But you
Yeah.
can't do that without conversation, and you can't do that without communication. And I think a lot of what we're doing on the internet nowadays has us so opposed to having conversation that we would just rather walk away from the job than to try to fix the job or fix the problem by just having a talk about it. And I think that's one skill that I think folks could maybe practice a little bit more. Just my thought on it. But
A rule of thumb, because I've been lucky enough in the last few years to have been involved in the hiring process, either as a hiring manager or as in my current role, DevRel, which weirdly enough does have a recruiting tilt to it, depending on the organization you're with. I was given a number. It was every person you hire, it costs 15% of their salary to hire them.
yeah.
So if you're hiring somebody for 100K, that's costing 10 grand just to get them in the door. An organization is more willing to pay that 10 grand on retaining existing talent that already knows the domain than they are to try and find somebody who then has to, well, to be brutally honest, spend multiple months learning and being mediocre at their job before they know the domain of information of the organization they work with.
Yeah.
Because there is no such thing as an engineer who can walk in and do the job day one, because
Right.
they actually have no idea what the product does.
Exactly.
Internally.
And I had that conversation with someone the other day too. Like they were being asked by a potential employer, like, can you hit the ground running on day one? It's like, nobody hits the ground running on day one. Everybody's got to set up their environment. Everybody's got to learn all of the systems and all the communication layers, and where do I even find the documentation, and where do I find this, where do I find that? Like, everybody's a junior dev their first day at work, no matter how much experience you have, is how I look at it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. BC asks a great question in chat. It says, I'm changing careers at 47, so you're only a year behind me. Getting an associate's in programming, using the vocational rehab with the VA, the Veterans Association. Where should I start looking for employment with this degree? It's a great question. You could potentially look back on what have you done in your career, and is there some sort of overlap? So if you think about like a Venn diagram of like, this is what I used to do and this is what I can do now, is there any kind of overlap in the middle? That's going to help you get back into the tech industry doing a similar role to what you have done. If you absolutely hated doing that kind of work and hated doing that kind of job, then you don't have to go back into that. But what you do need to explain is how all of that leading up to this new degree has set you up for success as a programmer. Like, what is it about that background that's going to bring value to my company for me to want to hire you? Like what is that value that you're going to bring to me? And so a lot of it you have to figure out. It's just the storytelling of this is what I'm capable of doing, and I want to come do that for your company, and really selling me on the idea of the potential impact that you're going to have on my company. So I've been saying that impact word on the stream quite a lot lately, but it really is about the impact that you're going to come have. And so when I look at your resume or look at your CV, I really need to see in a hurry, like ways that you can come to my business and do that kind of thing here. Like I wrote this script and I automated blah, 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 and it saved everybody 10% of this or that over the course of a week. It's like, okay, well, we can break that down week by the number of people that impact. We can put a dollar amount on that and go, you actually save that business X dollars by automating that thing. So you spend a little bit of time automating that thing, but you saved the company $1 million in salary. Like, heck yeah, come do that in my company, please. That's how you want to show that kind of value. And so any kind of background that you have where you've made impact or automated something or built a thing, like see if you can work that down into number of hours or amount of money or something along those lines to show business impact. And you're going to get a lot more hiring managers on the phone because they're going to see what that impact is and how you can have that impact at their company too, because that's what they're looking for. I'm not just looking for somebody that can sit down and write code. I want to know that what you're going to do is going to make my team better, make my like not just the small team that I hire you for, but it's going to make my engineering team better. It's going to make the whole organization better. That's what I'm hoping to hire. And so it really comes down to what do you have in your background that you can sort of pitch and sell them on in those early conversations about this is the value that I'm going to bring. So even though this is a complete career change, you still have a lot of other experience, a lot of other life experience, military background and whatnot, that you can really talk about, like leadership and discipline and things like that the company's going to care about, but also just some of the hands-on skills of problem solving and teamwork and so on, of how you had to communicate well and so on. Talk about how all of that is now making you a better programmer. That's really going to be the key here.
Yeah. I also think it's very important that people remember that you don't have to look for a job in your immediate area anymore. The pandemic and just software engineering as a career has changed drastically in 10 years. When I first entered the job market and for quite a few years afterwards, you would only be considered to be hireable if you could be in the office at any given day.
Mm-hmm.
And then 6 or so years ago, it was, we'll only pay you the top dollar salary if you live in on the West Coast, on the East Coast, in the New York area, and Boston area. In the UK, it's do you live in Paris, London, Berlin? That's changed. People have realized that, companies have realized that talent isn't limited to their immediate pool.
Mm-hmm.
So looking outside of your immediate area for companies that would be a better fit for you than something local is a completely valid way to find your way into a career that you find worthy of doing for yourself, rather than just a salary job.
That can be easier. Yeah, that can be easier said than done, though. I think, I'm reading a lot of stuff in the news lately about companies that are like, we want you to start coming back to the office again. I forget who it was. They were saying like, by September, we want you back in the office 3 days a week. And by November, like you have to have a really good excuse not to be in the office like all the time. And I worry about companies like that, because people are going to be like, nope, I really like having the flexibility of working from home where I'm not losing time on a commute to and from the office. Like that's time that I can be productive at home and not have to worry about, where am I going to park my car, or how do I take that public transit to the office, or, what if there's a storm, blah, blah, blah. Like there's so many things that can be a problem just getting to an office that I think over the past 2 years, almost 2.5 years now, we've proven we can do our job as programmers. We can do them remotely. Is it better to have that conversation? Yeah, but there are ways around that. You can have like open Zoom channels where people can connect if you've got a question about something. But again, it comes down to the communication of, you have to be willing to say like, I'm stuck. I know it's time to ask for help. Who's online? Who's available? Who can I go ask a quick question to? And I think that in some cases, people are so ingrained to not have that conversation skill as strong as we have in the past. Like I know people that they never answer the phone. When their phone rings, they never answer the phone, even if they know who's calling. They don't want to have a vocal conversation. They would rather do it over texting or do it over Slack. It's like, well, that's fine too, but like if you're stuck and you need help now, you need help now, not, you know, 2, 3, 4 hours from now because everything's asynchronous. You need to get somebody on a call that you can help get past that hurdle. And I think it's important to recognize when is it time to ask for help, but also the expedience of your company doesn't want to wait either for hours and hours and hours. If there's somebody that can help you now, they want you to have that communication. And so I think that's where some companies are like, okay, it is going to be really beneficial for, it is going to be really beneficial for people to have that in-person conversation to happen. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Let me get Mike back on the call here.
I think I got booted.
Yeah, no, you're back. You're back. You're all good. I was trying to fix something about chat and it broke the chat window completely. So
the joys of technology.
yeah, sorry everybody. We'll get you back on, get the chat back on the screen here. This is why you
No,
don't make changes in production.
You're completely right. We are at an unfortunate impasse where organizations haven't learnt as a whole how to do asynchronous teaching and how to do non-traditional maintenance of staff learning. So problems aren't being solved as quickly as they would have been whilst you're all in the office. So naturally, organizations are going, can we get back into the office where a whiteboard would help solve half the problem? Because if you can't describe it, you can draw the problem out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which is
sure.
a completely valid way of doing it. But yeah, I genuinely feel that some point in the next few years, there's going to be a threshold where that level of educational material and process and problem solving becomes asynchronous as well. You are right, though, 100% right now, that just doesn't exist. We haven't quite solved the solution. Even remote teaching doesn't work because half the people are tuning in whilst eating their cereal at 6 a.m. when their brain isn't really processing what they're trying to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Caparino brings up a good point too. Like, you know, should things like about going back to the office, should that be happening in opposite? Like, as winter comes, should people work from home more? Like, should companies be willing to let people work from home during the winter time where you're more likely to get a cold, you're more likely to get sick, and you're going to bring that to the office and get everybody else sick as well? But also because of storms and weather and whatever, it makes it a lot more hazardous to travel. I mean, every company is going to be a little bit different and they're going to have different policies on it. But I think that that's one of the things that you can research as you're looking into companies around, you know, what is your policy about coming back to the office? Like, can I be remote? Can I stay remote? You know, things like that I think are going to be really interesting to see how this adapts over the next couple of months. But I do see a lot more things in the news about companies like kind of putting their foot down, going, you know, we need to be more productive, and that's only going to happen if we're back in the office. It's like, no, I think we just need to figure out, is it really a productivity issue or is it just a visibility on productivity? Like, management thinks we're not being productive. How can we show them that we're actually being productive? You know, if it is a communication thing, then yeah, that could be fixed. And Driftwood asks, like, why can't we use virtual whiteboards? Because most of them are garbage. And most people don't have a tablet that they can actually draw on either. But those tablets are getting really cheap now, too. Those tablets are less than $100. So there's no reason why companies couldn't say, like, you know, if you need a little thing to like actually draw on, like, we'll get you a little Wacom tablet or something like that. Like, they're not that expensive anymore.
And you're not wrong. It's a weird thing to think about because 5 years ago this wouldn't even be in a consideration, but the world is moving much faster than careers and job roles and descriptions and KPIs have been designed around.
Yeah.
It's, what was it? I was told from a project manager 3 or 4 years ago. We only see the real value in the actual velocity of our Kanban board.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't include half the problem solving of most people who work in engineering. Right. Half the problem solving is deep in your brain, not on the solution on the paper half the time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Finance Singularity says in chat, you can also do the virtual whiteboarding with an iPad or Android tablet these days. And I actually like the tablet idea because you can actually see what you're drawing, where the other tablets is just, it's like a piece of paper that, the ink doesn't actually transfer onto, but you'd see it on your screen. So you're looking up here and trying to draw, and not everybody's got that hand-eye coordination down. So yeah, having a tablet is going to make a lot more sense for sure. Trash Dev says remote for life. Yeah, for sure. Good to have you. Good to have you dropping by, Trash.
I'm not gonna
Yeah,
lie, I've been a remote engineer since 2014, so I really have no skin in the game with being in office, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I do miss being around other people. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I love my kids and I love my dog, but like, it is nice to be back in the office. But the last job that I had, they're like, you can be 100% remote. If you want to come to the office, you can. I'm like, sweet, I'm gonna go to the office. And I went to the office, and I'm like, no, I'm going home. Like, I worked half a day, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna go back and work from home. And then I'm like, well, I'll go in on Tuesdays because that's when they order lunch for everybody, not just to get the free lunch, but like there were, because other people going to the office to get the free lunch.
Yeah.
There were more people to be social with and so on, and kind of interact with, and so I started going on Tuesdays. But there was also still pandemic stuff going on here in Colorado, and so I started not going then either. And yeah, I ended up just working from home 5 days a week. It's like it's more comfortable here. I've got my setup, I've got everything I need. I don't want to have to pack half of this stuff up and take it with me. Like,
Yeah.
I like my keyboard, I like my wireless keyboard, I'm going to take this thing with me everywhere I go. But it's a pain to like take this thing, put it in a backpack, and it's like I just want to work. Like, can I just, my commute is 2 flights of stairs now, and that's a fantastic commute for me. So
Yeah, unfortunately, we are in very, very lucky situations, which unfortunately doesn't apply to everybody. But it is, if we can do it, that does mean everybody else can too.
right.
With the right amount of conversation with managers and education and learning and transparency, it's all possible.
Yep. Driftwood says in chat, come in when you work. That's how mine is. But the offices are ghost towns, and that brings up a good point too. Like, a lot of what the companies are complaining about with the expense of running the business is the fact that they're renting or buying all this really expensive real estate, and then nobody's coming to use it. I've actually seen a lot of companies sort of downsize the office, not the people, but they're like, we can save all the money by shutting down like physical space. Like at Postman, for example, they're like, if there are enough people in an area and you want a co-working space and you're committed to actually going to the co-working space, we'll set up a co-working space. But like even Postman in San Francisco, they downsized their office. It's like, we told people they can work from home, they can work remote, like they can move, like we're not going to adjust your salary, because you move somewhere else, like, so you can work from wherever. So we're just going to downsize the office instead of the staff. It's like, that shows a lot of responsibility on the company side, that they understand where they need to cut costs. It's not the people. Maybe it's the locations and the foosball tables and whatever. Like, if people aren't coming to the office, you don't need all the fancy perks. You don't need that, $10,000 cappuccino machine and the kegerators and all that kind of stuff. If people aren't going to be at the office to use them, sell all that stuff, downsize the office, and go back to simpler times, and let people work remote. I think that's a smarter way of working and cutting those costs a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, that's just an amazing idea. I'm quite lucky in the fact that the company I work for, InfoSum, has one core head office, which every corporate entity does legally require in most countries. Everything else is, and I'm going to say a very dirty word now, is a WeWork space. Because they can just scale it as required for the amount of people who use the space.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to love WeWork, you don't have to like their business model, etc. But the flexibility of just having, we have a co-working space in New York, Hamburg, London. Our head office is in the town in the UK called Basingstoke, and it works. There's now enough space in the areas where there are enough people that they fill, and they only have one half-filled office that they have to have because of corporate legal reasons.
Yeah, and that's an important thing too, because we've had people on the stream too asking, like, if I live in some other country, can I work for a particular company? It's like, they might actually have to set up a legal entity in that country in order to pay you as an employee, you might have an easier time joining as a contractor, where they may not have that restriction. But that's only if you want to do contract work. Not everybody wants to do contract work. So
I'm quite lucky in the last 2 years. There is a solution to this problem. So I have been working. So in 2020 and 2021, I worked for an Israeli and a US business, neither of which had UK entities. They worked through an organization that is called an employer of record. What that means is it's through companies like Deal, Oyster, Remote, I think is another organization. These are organizations that have a business entity within the country that you personally operate, and they contract out your hiring through them. So you don't have to act as a contractor and deal with your own. I'm sorry for the US people in this. The rest of the world don't make you do your taxes for yourselves. The government does it for you most of the time.
yeah,
Sorry.
that would be a nice thing to
And
have for
these
sure.
organizations simplify that process for you.
Yeah, that it would be really nice if the U.S. just said like, this is how much tax has been paid on your behalf. This is what you owe is the difference, instead of like, we know how much we got paid. Like, we want to know if you can do the math and tell us the same number, and if not, you're in trouble. So,
Surprisingly, the rest of the world has caught up to that.
right. Finite, if you're still around, let me know in chat. Riker wants to come say hello. So Riker's my yellow lab. He's a British lab. He's a big chunky fellow, but he loves dropping by on stream and saying hi, especially when he hears me talking on the computer. He's like, "Oh, there's other people around." But no, Finite's still around. But I love seeing Roscoe on stream. All the ways that Finite has all his transitions and all the stuff going on in his stream is really really great to watch. So I started using Finite's software called Tau to help automate with the lights and stuff like that based
You're
on
a
what's
Tau
going on in
user
chat.
as well.
Yeah, just started playing with it just now. So yeah, it's pretty great software. So I'm trying now to figure out how do I get Tau to talk to Python to talk to OBS to actually make things happen in OBS, and that's where something broke earlier. So I had to just go comment all that stuff out and restart my bot and whatever, so the lights would blink when somebody followed. But
I have skipped straight past that. I have gone for the option of having Tau directly integrate with my overlays in JavaScript, so I can just have my everything act as a browser source.
oh, interesting.
Did you watch Finance stream yesterday with
No,
messing
I
with
missed
his
it yesterday.
phones? I did not realize how nuts that gentleman is with the amount of scenes he has. I have 8 scenes.
Oh, he's got
I
like
counted
800.
like 30 plus.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah,
Um,
I don't know how he keeps track of all that stuff. Like I have problems. Like I've got, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 scenes, and all of those I've got maybe a dozen sources. But yeah, he's just got scenes on sources, and yeah, it's great. It's great to watch. Like, definitely go give Finite Singularity a follow, and go check out his stream, like the stuff that he does around. So he kind of does 2 different streams. One is where he talks about the work that he does, and he'll actually do coding and talk about that. And then the other one is where he's like building the overlays and do all these cool transitions and stuff like that. But yeah, he's got some really really neat stuff going on. I haven't figured out. I'm not very skilled in JavaScript, so I haven't figured out how to get the overlays and so on built in a more direct way to just overlay on all of OBS. I'm trying to do everything through the WebSockets to actually like activate the sources and so on. Because I've got like, where is it? Like I've got the little like hello there thing to pop up and stuff like that. But like, I have to hit a button on my Stream Deck to make that happen. I want that to happen, that if somebody follows, it blinks the lights and makes Obi-Wan Kenobi show up. But I haven't got there quite yet. So.
I will make a suggestion of somebody who was spotted in stream very beginning.
Okay.
White Panther.
Yeah.
Salma, who happens to be an absolute god tier at doing that.
Awesome.
Absolute god tier. I'm not going to lie, stolen half of her ideas to make my own stuff.
Great. That's awesome.
Because there's no such thing as everything else on the internet.
Yeah, I think I've got White Panther on the rotating follow thing. So you'll see my Twitch bot over there saying like, hey, these are channels that I watch. So I just started watching White Panther, so I'll definitely check in on more of their streams.
Okay. Well, she'll be giving a talk at the event I run next month as well, where she'll be talking on some of this stuff. So that'll be quite interesting for you, because I stream that, weirdly enough.
Awesome. I will check that out. Do you have like a registration link or anything that you can share with us if we want to tune in on
I,
that kind of thing?
I don't, because of the fact that I actually haven't made it yet. I
we'll,
know,
we'll, we'll,
shame,
we'll just
shame.
that's where you lie and you just say like, oh, the system's offline right now. You don't
I
admit
don't.
you haven't built it yet. You just say, oh, it's not online.
If anybody is unfortunate enough to be in my stream, they are very aware that I am quite honest in my learning, where I don't know what I don't know. I would like to know what I would like to know, and
Sure.
if it doesn't exist, oops.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. And that's all part of the learning in public thing that I really like about
Mm,
Mike's stream too. Is like you can go hang out on Mike's stream and just watch him like work through things and try to figure out problems and stuff like that. I wish that I did more programming at work, that I could do that on a more regular basis.
yeah.
Because just showing people like, oh, let's go figure out this new thing in Postman, it's like that's not as interesting as like let's dive in on this programming thing that's going to take hours and hours or days to solve. It's like, oh, let's go figure out how to hook up Circle CI in Postman. Okay, 10 minutes later, I've got that figured out. So stream's over, I guess. Like, it's not as interesting to do that. But
I'm
um,
quite sensible. As a developer advocate, as yourself, I split my streaming into two categories:
mhm,
stuff I build for me and stuff I build because it helps my job.
sure.
So from next week on a Wednesday, I'll be streaming relearning Go,
Oh,
because
nice.
the programming language of my company is Go. I'm primarily JavaScript, Python, and PHP. So I should really learn Go so I understand what the heck the engineers are complaining about in Jira. Surprising. So I'll be streaming learning that stuff, which I know for a fact is going to hurt a lot, just because concepts are different. Um,
Mhm.
but then I also pick a project. So personally, you've probably dropped in whilst I've been learning how to build. What was the last project I built? Oh God, what was the last one? Oh, the stupid troll selector, the application just
Yes.
specifically for trolling me in stream because I wanted to learn how Superbase worked and what the limitations were.
Yeah.
FYI for everybody in chat who has a little bit of engineering under the belt, Superbase's RESTful API implementation does not allow for all of Postgres's magic. Please use the direct Postgres integration for doing things like complex joins.
Yeah. Zooey's also asking for a link for that as well, Mike. If you have that to share.
For which bit?
Maybe the super base or the code that you're doing on that.
Okay, so Superbase, and I will just add that into chat. There.
And have you so Mike, you mentioned relearning Go. Have you learned Go in the past and you're like getting back up to speed on it, or?
I tried learning Go last year, just because I had a month between jobs, and it was like, you know what? What sounds like a great idea? Let's pick up a brand new language, because what else sounds like punishing oneself rather than fun? So I decided to try picking up Rust and Go at the same time. I made the poor choice of trying to learn two new languages at once.
Yeah,
So
that can be
now I'm going
tricky.
to stick to learning one.
Yeah, that's fair. One thing that I found really helpful is when you're learning a new language, having a debugger is like a must-have, so that you can actually
Yes.
step through the code and get some visibility into what's going on. And JetBrains actually has a really good Go editor called GoLand, and they've got a step through debugger. The debugger that they integrated into their IDE was actually a community-based tool that somebody else built. I think it was called Delve, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, the debugger that comes with Go is pretty good, but have you seen this Delve project? It was pretty cool." So when JetBrains actually made their Go IDE, they actually built the Delve debugger into it as a step-through debugger, and you can do all the watches on variables and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really good tool. You can get like a 30-day free license for it if your company doesn't already have like enterprise licensing for the JetBrains stuff. But it's like I have a lot of respect for their tools because all the interfaces are exactly the same. So if you're doing Python or Ruby or Java or C# or Go or whatever, like the IDE feels exactly the same. But when you hit that debugger is specific to the language that you're in based on which IDE you've loaded up. Now, if you load up IntelliJ and you load the Python plugin into it, it doesn't have the Python debugger. You have to use PyCharm, or you have to use RubyMine, or you have to use WebStorm for JavaScript and so on. Um, I'm not sponsored at all by JetBrains, but I've been a user of their Toolbox license for years and years and years. And
I have
I
mixed
recommend it if
feelings
your
on
company
JetBrains.
can pay for it. I recommend it.
Yeah, I've had mixed feelings on them because unfortunately I am from an Eclipse background.
Okay,
There was a period of time when Eclipse and IntelliJ were one-to-oneing each other, which meant they just kept getting bigger and bloatier. And
for sure.
JetBrains then did the sensible thing and started spinning out specifics, language-specific programming languages, so PHP Storm, etc. Like they skimmed it down and made it usable.
Mm,
But having the magical all-in-one tool was just a bloaty, blocky hell. Which is
yeah,
when I then discovered that the ability to debug in any program language is just the ability to dump to console. If you can learn how to just dump to console anything, you can fix a problem regardless of where you are.
true.
A proper debugger tool just makes that more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you can certainly like console log things or print things out to your terminal and so on. But I like having the debugger where you can just like step through and you can set breakpoints on things and say like run until you hit this point and then stop and let me look around and then continue working, as opposed to go dump this thing out and I got to start that and go through that process again and again. Yeah, it's definitely an efficiency thing for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was watching Sociable Steve earlier today about 2 p.m. BST time, who was writing for the first time C Sharp. He's a JavaScript developer, much like myself, and was learning how to do C Sharp purely so he could interact with, I think it was Microsoft Flight Simulator to extract data
Interesting.
directly out of the client from there.
That's
And
cool.
just he went and did it just JavaScript style with, I'm just going to learn how to do print line in C Sharp and go from there.
Nice.
He managed to get all the information out. He just managed to get it out in a really ugly way.
That's usually how it starts with programming. Starts
Yeah.
out ugly and then we make it pretty after that. So Mike, you're talking about like console logging and debuggers as our friend and things like that. What other tips would you have for people that are like new, getting started in the industry? Like what other like this has come up too. Like what should I have to know to go get the job? I had a
Mm,
thing on my stream recently where I was kind of railing a little bit against like, don't pay attention to those things that say like, oh, you must know these 10 things to be a programmer. It's like, because every list you read is going to be slightly different and you're never going to feel like you're ready to be a programmer if you're always reading these lists and always have something new to go learn. But like, what would you say are like the core skills that, like, if you're coming out of a school or a university or even a boot camp, like knowing these three things are really going to help like set you apart in an interview or at a company?
okay. This one's going to be mildly controversial, but I strongly feel knowing one scripting language is key.
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't
Okay.
care what scripting language that is, but the ability to just hack a script together to get a job done is really important. Doesn't matter how well it is. It could be in Bash, Python, PHP, JavaScript. I don't care, but as somebody who's led senior engineering teams, the ability to solve a problem on the fly always comes down to somebody writing a scripting language with like a decent amount of try, catch, and error handling.
Okay.
Now, you don't have to know how to write an entire microservice architecture. You just need to be able to solve problem A. Problem B can wait until after problem A has been solved.
Sure. Okay.
Understand the core internet stack is another one. There is the unfortunate problem of a lot of top 10 hype lists, and you must know X and Y, means that a lot of people have learned things like React and Angular and Svelte, etc., and all its core internals. And then they have no idea how JavaScript in itself works when they've tried making a website and realizing that browser X doesn't behave like browser Y. So if you're going to be a web engineer, understanding how the internet compiles down is important. Remember that the internet was not built with JavaScript first. Is a very, very, very core lesson that I've had to teach quite a few junior engineers as Yes, remember you can use your CSS before you have to use JS decorators. Learn your fundamentals, as Driftwood has said. Actually, yes,
Yep.
accurate.
Okay. What would you say are some of those fundamentals? Like obviously knowing like how does HTTP work is a important one, but do
Yes.
you have to know how DNS works? Probably not. I mean, depending on your role, you probably don't have to worry about DNS, but knowing what a port number is and like why we may need to connect to a port number instead of just a domain, like those kinds of fundamentals, or are you talking about other things?
No, I think those as well. So how a port works purely because of the fact that we now exist in a SaaS-based world where port shifting is now a standard practice of gluing information together. There's also the fact that understanding how domain names map to IPs, not necessarily how the complete DNS stack works with TLD and the higher level, but understanding how a domain name with subdomains and subdirectories map up to routing engines for servers, proxying, and how they actually map down to IPv4 and IPv6 addresses, only because of the fact that one of the big things is when debugging a mobile app, finding out if the information is going to the place you meant it to go to first,
Hmm.
which I have had in a couple of jobs previously. Is like, why is this not? Oh, that's because the actual URL is not structured like that. Oops, because it's dynamic.
Yeah.
Should have coded for a more dynamic routing system.
One
Um,
one topic that I like to share with JavaScript developers, especially at boot camps where they're teaching front end programs or as part of the front end portion of a full stack program. One thing that I think that some schools don't teach enough around the understanding of user experiences. If you write really bad JavaScript code, you're not slowing down a server somewhere. You're slowing down my computer because your JavaScript code is using my CPU and my RAM. And so your lousy code is affecting everything on my computer, not just like, if I write bad backend code, that one tab in that one browser window is a little bit slow to respond. But if you write bad JavaScript, you're slowing down everything that's going on.
yeah, and it gets worse because of the fact that something that people don't realize is the more we front load our logic etc into JavaScript etc, the more JavaScript that is executed in a browser, on a mobile phone, on a tablet, and the slower things are going to get for every single user downloading it, not just the one specific path of usage.
Hmm. Yep.
That is a. I don't think I've ever had to teach that one, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep that one in the back of my head for now.
Yeah. Because I remember back in the day, way back in my day when we started, um, we would try to figure out, okay, I need this JavaScript on this page, I need this JavaScript on that page, and so this page is only going to load that JavaScript. But nowadays, we kind of compile everything into one massive JavaScript file, one massive CSS file, and even though we minify it and whatever to reduce that size, the complexity doesn't get reduced. And so, as Mike said, the more code you add, the larger this JavaScript file is that's being sent around on every single request potentially, if the end client's not caching it. So you're sending a lot more information. Then it's got to go through. It's got to parse all that and read through it, and then figure out what code do I actually execute. So yeah, it can gradually start to slow lots of things down.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
It's like, everything new will make everything better. It does not necessarily make everything better. It just makes life
Mhm.
easier.
Yeah. Driftwood brings up a good point, and this kind of comes back to leak code, that someone was asking about earlier. Like, do we just grind on leak code? It's like Driftwood says, I think a lot of people get stuck at like, oh, if I just know algorithms and study them, I'll be able to code. But it's more the problem solving of the overall strategy of how do I put all these little bits and pieces together into a whole solution, but doing all of that in an effective way that we're not causing other problems down the line.
And the horrible thing with that is it comes with experience.
It
There is
does.
no way to learn that off the bat.
Yep,
There
for
is
sure.
no one blog post that teaches you this stuff. It is working with people better than you so you can learn from them,
Hmm.
learning from people
Exactly.
willing to teach.
Yep. Well, and being willing to teach doesn't make you a good teacher either. I learned that the
Or
hard way when I got into teaching. I'm like, oh, I've been in engineering for 20 plus years. Like, sure, I'll come teach this stuff, and then just watching the deer in the headlights kind of look on my students as I'm like, and like talking really really fast, and they're just not getting it. I'm like, why aren't they getting it? This is easy. It's like, well, sure, it's easy when you've been doing it for 20 years, but it's not easy when you're learning these brand new concepts. So just having the experience doesn't necessarily make you a good teacher. You have to know how to teach and how to be an effective teacher as well. But I think definitely sharing what you know is important. You can always figure out like how best to answer those questions and how best to sort of teach those concepts over time. But I think being willing to share that knowledge is one thing, but being able to ask for that knowledge, I think, is just as important. So on both sides, you have to be willing, but you also have to be asking for that information too.
yeah. Uh, my brain was just reminded of the fact that I am very lucky to have developer relations as a job where teaching is a format of it.
Mm-hmm.
However, I realized not it took me a while to realize this, but I am actually a horrible teacher until I got told to slow the heck down for non-native English speakers.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure.
Because
Translatability is a big thing.
when you assume everybody can process the information in your language at the same speed as you, you're making a terrible mistake.
Yeah. I actually started going through the email series that I wrote and removing contractions instead of like you can't do blah blah blah. I'd say you cannot do blah blah blah. Just it helps with the translatability, like if they're using translators or even just accessibility purposes, like screen readers sometimes do a little bit better with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely important. Um, cool. Let's see. We've been going for about an hour and 20. What other kinds of topics can we get into? Also, if folks have questions for Mike, absolutely drop those in chat. Mike, I've got one question for you around CVs. So back in the day, probably back when you started your career, CVs were kind of meant to be this really long document of, tell me
Mm.
absolutely everything you've ever done, ever, ever, ever. Nowadays, I think even in the UK, the CV idea has kind of followed suit with the American resume of like try to keep it to a page or two. What have you seen around that sort of transition over time, or like what would you say belongs on a resume or not if you're trying to get a particular job?
There was a big thing very early in my career with multiple recruitment agencies I was going through to try and get the jobs where they asked me to put every buzzword I could think of on the CV,
Hmm.
which meant my CV was, swear to God, at least 2 pages long. And it's like, please make sure you have your degree on the bottom of it and etc. Um, I don't have my degree on my CV anymore. Haven't done for years because in reality, my knowledge from my university degree has far been outweighed by all my industry
Yep,
experience.
absolutely.
And I've learned that having a spammy section including just all the technical buzzwords doesn't work either because those may not be contextually aware for the jobs you are hiring. Unfortunately, a CV is, from what I have been able to tell from the people I've been helping with the boot camps and from the recruiters I've dealt with, a CV is getting towards being needed to be tailored like a cover letter. Being able to take the relevant keywords for the relevant job so that you show relevance in, say, your last couple of jobs or your last bits of learning, rather than just everything you've learned over a 5 to 10 year period. Because weirdly enough, just because at some point you learned jQuery doesn't mean it's relevant now.
Hmm. Or not relevant to a particular company.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it may
Yeah,
come into your working in a accessibility company and they require to have IE6 compatibility, which jQuery works brilliant at.
right.
Then obviously being able to say, yes, I have done accessibility things to a really low level, it solves the problem. But I definitely feel that CVs are starting to become as quick to read as possible because attention spans are shorter. When I was last reading CVs, I was trying to read about 40 of them in an hour, which meant each one was getting less than a minute in reality of my time to process
Hmm.
it. So I was actively culling things just because I couldn't understand if they were relevant at the time.
Hmm. Yep.
That sounds very awful, and I probably was doing some people the injustice, but I had a time
It's
crunch
the
of
reality of
an
it.
engineering
Yeah,
job.
and yeah, and I talk about that on the stream too. Like, if I can't find out in a hurry whether you're relevant for my job, like, I'm not gonna call you. Like, I need to find out, do you have the skills I want? Do you have the background I want? Is there something in here that's going to like really entice me to call you? If not, like, at best you're on my maybe pile, and at worst I'm going to pass and you're not ever going to hear from my company.
Yeah,
Um, and it's one thing to have the recruiter, look at it and go, it matches all the buzzwords, so I'll pass it on to the hiring manager. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to call you. Like, I know some companies where the HR screens it, they hand it to the hiring manager who screens it, and then it goes back to HR, and then they call you. Other companies, HR will screen it. They'll call you and say, let's chat a little bit about why you want the job. Let me tell you a little bit about the interview, and so on. And now I'm going to get a hold of the hiring manager, and then you never hear back. It's because the hiring manager said no.
yeah,
And so knowing, like, when you're applying for these jobs, like, how far do you get through the process before dropping off, we can help identify, like, okay, well, it was probably that kind of company then. But you can always ask the recruiter, like, has the hiring manager seen my resume or CV yet? Like, I'm just kind of curious what the screening, like the full screening process is. And if they say, like, yeah, we've all looked at your resume, therefore we're calling you, then if you don't get a call later on, it was something that you've done, as opposed to, like, oh, the hiring manager hadn't actually heard anything about you until HR said, we've gone through these resumes, we've called these people, here's a list for you to examine. And of that list, they're only going to pick a handful of them. Like, if they get
yeah.
handed a list of 10 or 20, they're only going to pick 5 to call, and hope that one of those 5 is going to stand out in an interview. And if not, then they'll move on to the rest. Um, but there are going to be some clear no's in there too. So I agree with Mike. Like, if you can't show relevance in a hurry, you're more likely to get passed over.
What is it? I was given as a piece of advice from my old boss. All the really relevant new information should be in the first half of an A4 piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
the ability to just quickly scan and go, okay, is this worth investing 5 minutes of deeper research and looking at their GitHub, etc. Was a rule he gave me when I was trying to hire for the last job for there.
Yeah. Mike, are you familiar with newspaper terminology by chance, or
Unfortunately, yes.
or advertising? If
That
I said
wonderful above the fold principle.
above the fold, yeah. So when we talk about above the fold, like, if this is the newspaper, right? When they fold it back, the most important relevant stuff is going to be on the top half of that page. This is where the
Mhm.
really eye-catching stuff is going to be. And that's why, as a hiring manager, and I stress this on my stream a lot, put your skills block as the very first thing on the resume, because that's the first thing they're going to see of, like, do you have the skills that I need for this job? And then
Skill block
maybe,
and
like, the top project or top experience that's relevant to that job.
yeah. Like if you've got a bunch of skills and a link out to your GitHub to prove that you have said skills, combination win.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to get the job, but you're far more likely to at least have them look at your resume and go, "This is relevant. Let's consider calling this individual." So,
Yeah, it's a clear indicator of doing a deeper dive into an individual.
yeah. So we got a
Oh, that's my
first time chat.
question.
What is eye catching in a resume? So, as a hiring manager, appreciate the first time chat, and for the follow. Thank you for that. Um, eye catching stuff, Mike. What would you say stands out on a resume?
Oh, a one-to-one match between the required section of the job specification and the skills that are applied. If you're asking for a DevOps engineer and you have Linux experience, if in your last job I administered Ubuntu servers, there is a one-to-one mapping between direct skill from the required list of the jobs that we've hired and what you have in that top list. If your first job is I spent forever, I don't know, doing network engineering, doesn't necessarily map up directly to being a DevOps engineer. but you have done Linux stuff, because every infrastructure engineer I know has done Linux stuff at some point and somewhere. They just don't think that's the most important thing because that wasn't what they were doing for that job.
Right.
It's tailoring.
Yep. And same thing with the skills block. Like if I'm a really strong Python developer and I've done Ruby and I've done JavaScript and I've done PHP and I want to apply for a job where I need to have JavaScript experience, I'm going to put JavaScript at the front of that list because I want to look like a JavaScript developer who also happens to know Python and Ruby and PHP. But if I look like a Python developer who knows Ruby and PHP and JavaScript's like way down the line, it's like, okay, well, you have that skill, but like you're not promoting that as like your primary skill. Those
Yeah.
kinds of things will really stand out. And it's not that it's standing out in a blatantly bad way, but it's kind of a subconscious thing that as we read these lists from left to right, what's on the left, we feel you know better than the things later on in the list. And so I always tell people, like, whatever skills they're looking for, put that at the start of your bullet point lists of these are the skills I have, the languages I know, because they're just when we vertically read a like a bullet point list visually and peripherally, we're only picking up the first 5 or 6 words of that list anyway. And so if
Yeah.
JavaScript is like way down that list, we're not seeing it anyway. So it's got to be in that first couple of words of that bullet point list. So as we're scanning down, we're seeing JavaScript, React, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. They're a JavaScript developer. Now I'm going to look at your projects. The first project I see is a JavaScript project. Cool. Let me click on that. Let me look through the code briefly. All right, let's call this person. But if you say, well, I know Python and I blah, 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 and I've got JavaScript way down the line, and the first couple of projects you show me are these cool Python projects, it's like, okay, well, I'm looking for a JavaScript developer. So you're not showing that relevance, and it's not going to be as catching to me on either a conscious or subconscious level that I'm finding what I'm looking for as I'm looking over that resume or CV.
Yeah. No, I'd agree.
So the advice I typically give on the stream, and you know, forgive my regular viewers that hear me say this just about every single stream, build a gigantic resume. Every project, every skill, every language, every technology you've ever done, every job you've ever had, give me lots of bullet points. When you go to apply for a job, you're going to make a copy of that, and you're going to trim it back down to 1 page or 2 pages of only the relevant stuff that company cares about for that role. And you're going to trim all the other stuff out because they don't care to read it anyway. It's like you got that decade of PHP experience and they don't even do PHP. Don't put it on the resume. It's like if they want to know like how have you spent the entirety of your career, they'll ask. But when it comes to that resume, it needs to be a really short, enticing document of why I should call you. So those are the kinds of things. And then the other eye-catching thing we kind of talked about earlier in the stream is like talking about the impact that you had. Like if you developed something that optimized and saved 10% of time or made something 20% more efficient, if you can work that down to a dollar amount, those kinds of things really stand out to the business-oriented side of the hiring team. For the engineers on the team, like talking about like we made it 15% more efficient and saved, you know, $100 or $100,000 worth of salary time. Now you're hitting both on the engineering and on the business side. So anytime that you can quantify data and really talk about the impact that it had and why it made things better, that's going to really stand out to me as a hiring manager. Now,
Yeah.
it's not always possible to come up with that information, but if you can, that kind of stuff is really going to catch their eye.
And even if you're really, really early into your career, that's still something you can build. Passion projects, side projects. It doesn't have to be something you've done for a Fortune 500 company to count.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I'm trying to remember who was asking earlier about switching jobs and getting their degree through the VA. But those are the kinds of things where, you know, even if you can't think of how this is important, you know, to a job as a programmer, like if you're coming from other background and other like other work experience or life experience, there are ways that you could talk about what you did that shows that relevance and shows the impact that something in life had, or something in that previous experience had. And so I think working with someone who can help you reword things and phrase things like that, I think is important.
Yeah.
Thindal says, "Hi, the smart one and the crazy one. Figure out. I'll let you figure out who's who." I mean, my guest is both. So where does that leave me? I don't know.
I'm
Thanks,
definitely
I
the
guess.
crazy one. Uh, but yeah, I'm quite lucky in the fact that somebody I've been mentoring in the last three or 4 months is actually a fellow streamer, Rich Codes Web,
Okay.
who has been, due to health reasons, not actively in an engineering role for quite a while. So he's been relearning to build the same project over and over again in different languages. So
Interesting.
things don't have to be learning a whole new concept, etc. They can just be learning a new language, learning a new system around something that you know already. Like if you know a given data system or a given library, you don't have to learn everything new at once. You can pick up. So he's been picking up JavaScript and TypeScript when coming from a Python program as his most recent project.
Okay.
So instead of like reinventing it, I'm going to carry on using Postgres and learn how to interact with that with JavaScript instead.
Hmm.
It's you don't have to learn everything brand new. You can just add a little bit more skill every time to that big old list of relevant things for your next career choice.
Right.
I know
Fool
that's
brought
probably
up
telling
a
your crowd to suck eggs at this point, but yes.
no. It's all good. Fool made a great comment in chat. It's, I saved 100,000 per month by mistakenly deleting the entire database. Uh, yep. That's one way to save stuff.
I
Dota, go ahead.
I was about to say, I strongly have a feeling that every person is allowed one giant screw up at work. Mine has
Yes.
been previously truncating an entire data system in production.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Everybody is allowed one.
I dropped about 150 million rows of production data one time. Thankfully, our DBA not only made backups but also tested that the backups worked and was able to restore the data like really really quickly. And like customers barely had time to get on the phone, and we had it restored. Dota 2 said, "I got nerd sniped on a TypeScript problem. 2 hours later, I solved it." That's cool. I haven't done anything with TypeScript at all, but I do like strongly typed languages. Like I come from more of a compiled background. Um, but lately I do a lot of stuff in Python. But I miss having strongly typed languages. Like I did a fair amount of Go, and I actually quite like Go. It's a pretty fun language for sure. But it is a very different way of thinking because it's not object oriented. That was actually my biggest hurdle, where I didn't have a strong foundation in object oriented programming because of the type of coding that I did in computer engineering. It was a lot of C and assembly. And so I didn't really learn object-oriented programming. And then once I learned it, I didn't want to give it up. And so going back to Go, which wasn't object-oriented, felt like I was actually going backwards in my learning. But it is actually really, really great. Like from a built-in concurrency point of view, it's a fantastic language. I really like it.
Okay. I'm
Um,
unfortunately from the absolute opposite end of the spectrum, where I've only ever used JIT languages in production.
yeah.
I'm so far so much so that I hate Java passionately.
Yeah. That's probably a shared opinion with a lot of folks.
Yeah.
But cool. Let's see. We've been going a little over an hour and a half, and I promised Mike I was only going to take up 90 minutes of his time. Mike, how are you doing on time?
I'm not gonna lie, I'm starting to get hungry because over
All right.
here in the UK it is 7:30 and prime eating time.
All right. Well, we'll start to wrap up then. We'll let Mike go. If you do have questions about interview prep and career advancement and so on, you're welcome to drop that stuff in chat. I'm happy to hang out for a little bit longer, but we can start to wrap up and let Mike go. So let me get all of your contact info back in chat here. We'll do a bang guest. So you can go connect with Mike on Twitter, and Mike streams here on Twitch. So definitely go give Mike a follow here on Twitch. And you can also connect on LinkedIn if you like. Anything else? So Mike, what else do you promote? Like you work with a bunch of boot camps. You've got this conference coming up someday that you'll eventually maybe have a registration page for. What else do you have
Well, I've
going on
actually
in
got
life?
two conferences. That's the weird problem. It's just only one of them happens to involve Salma. So I am currently helping to organize this thing, which is actually free to attend if you're in the UK and free to stream if you are outside the UK,
Okay.
which is a polyglot conference. Um, Otherwise, I've got the one I'm organizing, but we don't have the details on the page, so I can't share it.
All good.
What else? It's like I would love to be able to promote my day job, but I'm still building all the fundamentals for developers to get a hold of that, so that doesn't work. I am here for everybody's edutainment. They are welcome to troll me, ask me questions. I try and help people with basic programming and fundamental learning stuff, as well as um, I build awful ideas that people have recommended me to build because it gives me a chance to learn how to build something. My next project, as of next Friday, is going to be building Tinder for beer.
Tinder for beer. Tell us how that's going to work.
For those of you of the beer crowd or spent time in my stream, you will know I use an app called Untapped for tracking the beers I drink.
Hmm.
Horribly, though, Untapped requires you to give a integer-based rating for the beers you drink. I'm not going to lie, half the time I just want to know that I've drank them, not how good they were. So I'm going to be building a binary-based system using a swipe gesture recommendation. This is actually recommended by T. Drayson, another streamer,
Hmm.
as a way to interact and recognize that you have consumed and or wish to consume at a later point or wish to stay the heck away from. Because I am a beer nerd as well as a software nerd.
Could you build up that rating based on how many times you've actually consumed it? Because like if
My
you like that beer, you're gonna keep consuming it. Therefore, you're kind of recommending it.
my plan was to make it a location-based system so that when
Okay.
you're in a bar, etc., it will register the beers available there, and you can keep checking the ones in that you have continued to enjoy. That
Interesting.
way, we could build a weighted rating system and actually then recommend beers to people depending on where they are that are relevant to them where they are.
That's cool. That sounds neat. Yeah, I used Untap back in the day. I don't drink very much anymore, um, but yeah, I used it. I used it a little bit. It's and I think they actually had an API at one point, and then they shut down access to their API, which is disappointing because I know a lot of people were trying to build really interesting apps around like their own sort of location idea. But let's get into the Untapped database so you can access your previous beer history and
I
stuff like
still
that. But
have my API key. That's why
do
I'm
you?
doing it.
Nice.
Yes,
That's great.
there's a reason I'm getting away with it. I have my existing key.
Yeah.
So my plan is to build it out from there. I'm learning this actually as an excuse to learn Flutter.
Okay.
So I know how to do the API work. I know how to do the data management work. I now
Mhm.
want to learn how to do some mobile dev, and you can blame Finite for that.
I blame Finite for a lot of things. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah, definitely go check out Finite Singularity as well. Really, really interesting stream to go watch. Mike, appreciate your time. I always love having people from different backgrounds and different experiences, different walks of life. In your case, also completely different location, just to hear about some of the experiences that you've had and kind of your journey into tech. I think it's pretty eye opening to other people as well to recognize like you don't have to go get the typical CS degree and take this typical CS path. Like there's so many different ways that you can get into tech and things that you can do with tech. So I always appreciate hearing other perspectives on what goes on a resume, what stands out, like all that kind of stuff. And it just so happened that a lot of your opinions that you shared, I also echo here on the stream as well. So appreciate hearing opinions, whether or not they're aligned with mine. But I think it's good just to hear different perspectives and so on for sure.
May I share one more mildly
Absolutely,
controversial opinion?
absolutely.
One thing I've noticed with people from boot camps are they do pigeonhole themselves into this thinking of having to get a internship or grad role or something as a software engineer.
Okay,
You don't have to. If you feel that being in project management, product development, something that is adjacent, so you've learned a lot of stuff, but you found there's a better fit. There's nothing to say that you have to go into a software engineering job
sure.
because the boot camp told you to become a full stack engineer.
Mm-hmm.
It is
It's true.
okay to go into something that is relevant because of all the things you've learned.
Yeah, that's a great point, especially for people that are career changers. if you've got any sort of like project management background, take that into a tech role as a technical project manager. You can lean on previous experiences. Like I was saying, like sometimes that's the easier road into a company. And yeah, we've had people on the stream last summer that went through a boot camp, and one got a DevOps job, one went into sales engineering, and one went into developer relations, one went into technical writing, like there's and one went into QA. Like there's so many different avenues that you can get into. You don't have to feel like you have to be a programmer, otherwise you're not a success. And the same thing, like you don't have to go get a FANG job, at the top, 10, 15, 20 companies in the world to feel like a success either. Like getting any kind of job, getting a paycheck, that's success. Like you did the thing, you learned the thing, you're doing the thing, you're getting paid for the thing. So awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, again, thank you for your time. Any last sort of closing thoughts? Anything else you want to share with us?
No, all I want to say is everybody should have a goddamn good Sunday and enjoy the rest of the weekend, because most of us are going to be going to work tomorrow morning.
For sure. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Mike. We'll let you go. I'm going to stay on the chat here on the stream for a little bit, but Mike, thanks again, and we'll catch you on
No
your
worries.
stream tomorrow.
See you later, Ian.
Cheers.
See you all in the rest of the world.
All right. Big thank you to Mike for spending some time with us today. I always love having just the other perspectives and things like that. And so part of streaming earlier on Sundays is about having folks from other areas of the world be able to come on the stream. So on Sundays through August and into all of September and into October now, we're going to be having guests on the stream from all over the world. We're going to have a lot of folks from the UK, all the way, well, between UK and Vietnam, basically everywhere in between. We're going to have lots of folks on the stream. So we're looking forward to having just a lot of different folks on Sundays. And then I think every other Thursday, we're going to aim to have a guest on the stream who's probably more domestic in the Americas, or at least North America, South America kind of range. But yeah, always love having different kinds of opinions and backgrounds and so on. I'm happy to keep streaming. If folks have questions that they want to ask, or topics that you want to chat about, I'm more than happy to address any of that. I've got some time here on this side. If you do have questions, or if you want help with anything company research, if you want help with a resume, I did get one more resume into review that I'll probably wait, and we'll batch like a whole bunch of resume reviews. But yeah, let me throw out some other links. If you want to join our Discord community, we have a small but growing Discord community. BR Turing, thanks for the follow as well. And I've got an email series that you can go subscribe to. I'm about ready to launch. There we go. I'm about ready to launch the new email series for the technical questions, the behavioral questions, and some of the general, like what is the interview process even like and what's it about. And so a couple of streams ago, or several streams ago, I had people like check everything out from a user experience point of view, and I am ready to launch those first 3. The general one still has some content to be added, and the preparation mailing list is taking a little bit longer to get ready. But the preparation one is going to be about like resumes and cover letters and the company research and what to study and so on. Hey, appreciate the 5 bits. Appreciate that. So yeah, we'll be doing a lot more of that content over the next like couple of months. It's going to take a while to get through the preparation content, but if you are interested, I'll have I'm hoping to get that new one launched in the next couple of weeks, actually, for the behavioral and the technical ones, and then the general one. Like I said, there's about a dozen messages ready to go, and I got about another dozen that I want to add to it. But you will need to resubscribe to get it, because I've got them kind of ordered. Like I want to, like the preparation one, for example, is like teach you about building the resume of like all the things, and then get into the company research, and then a message about tailoring that resume, and so on and so on. And so I want to make sure that the content that I've got ready to go is kind of in position, but there's content in between that I need to write, and I don't want to necessarily send it out after the fact. So what I might do is just tell people, like, if you want like all the latest and greatest, like once you finish the series, just go back and resubscribe, and you'll get like any new messages that I added along the way. But the technical and the behavioral ones are all done. They're completely finished and ready to go. And a lot of that comes from this email series. excuse me, where I basically took the one email series and I split them into two parts, because that series does cover a lot of technical and behavioral questions, but not from here's how to answer it, properly. What I do in the email series is I talk about why I asked those questions to begin with. Like, as a hiring manager, why do we even ask these kinds of questions? Why is this important? What am I really asking? Am I asking your opinion? Am I asking for your experience, and so on? And so those are things that I cover in that email series. So you're welcome to subscribe to that if you like. But yeah, otherwise, if you want to ask a question, if you want to ask it anonymously, you can whisper it over to the bot and it will show up in chat. If you ever want a resume review, I'll drop that one in here as well. You can certainly send me a resume over to this link, and I will, as soon as I get like a handful of them together, I'll go through and I'll do a bunch of resume reviews for folks. But otherwise, if you got questions, I'm happy to stick around for a little bit. Otherwise, I've got the regular Sunday kind of thing to do around here, which is go figure out what we're gonna have for meals for the week and go do meal prep and groceries and all that kind of stuff. But other than that, I'm happy to just kind of hang out with folks and chat and chill for a little bit. So if you do have questions, feel free to drop them in chat. Otherwise, we can start to wind down. But I was liking, just hanging out with folks and see what's going on. Let's see what else is going on my side. So ordered some more 3D printer stuff. So that'll be coming in over the next couple of months. I'm going to build like a really large format printer to get into like 3D printing really big things. So that's going to be fun. Can you explain a little bit more what a developer relations or advocate does on a day-to-day? Sure. Yeah, good question, Robo-Oso. In my job, well, let me break it down a little bit more. So when we think about developer relations and developer advocacy, there tends to be three core concepts that we spend our time on, and that's code, community, and content. Not every company does code. Not every company does community. Not every company does content. And so there's some mix or match of like, what's the technical proficiency of what you do, and then how do you engage with other people, and then like, how do you get that content out there? And so those cover a lot of different kinds of facets in that regard. So my day to day right now, I'm producing a lot of content for education purposes on here's how to do a thing. So I've been putting up videos, I've been putting up blog posts around here's how to do this thing in the Postman product. So for those that don't know, I work at Postman as a developer advocate. And so my job also entails talking to partner customers. So customers that use Postman who want help with what we call our public API network. So we've got the largest API network catalog of other APIs that you can go use. So you open up Postman, you can use the search bar and say, I'm looking for a weather API. You're going to find a ton of them. I'm looking for a joke API. You're going to find a ton of them. And so we have the largest public API network catalog. And so I work with partners who want to show up in that catalog that we can highlight and spotlight and say like, hey, here's this new cool thing that we do. For example, Dolby had some really cool audio and video processing APIs that they released back in April. So I did a live stream with them early last month, where we actually processed a video on the live stream where it filtered out like a ton of background noise. So if you think about like taking video around like a zoo or an aquarium, there's lots of background noise. And the Dolby API, you upload the video and you run this API command, and it basically reprocessed the video and it stripped out all that background noise and exported the video without all that. So like just, how do I work with those partners to do those kinds of things? So we do live stream with those partner events, but I also get on calls with them and talk about what can they do on their sort of public facing collection that other people using Postman can go find them a little more easily, or coordinate guest blog posts. So if you want to blog on the Postman blog, like what does that entail? And then how do we get you some swag? Or is there something that I can write for your blog just for thought leadership kinds of purposes? And then I also do technical conference talks. So I've got a talk coming up next month, but I'm also teaching a webinar this coming Wednesday. So you can go find that. If you go do a Google search for Postman Space Camp, you'll go find information about that. And so I'm actually kind of leading the sort of Space Camp webinars that we do. And we've been doing them monthly, but we're probably going to take September off because we got some big news coming up from Postman in September, and it's probably going to take over a lot of our time and so on for that. And so we'll probably get back into the webinars for Q4. but I have to talk to my manager about that. So that's how I spend a lot of my time, is a lot of content and a lot of community side of it. Like I was saying with Mike, I don't really do a lot of code on a regular basis. And so I try to find things around here at home that I can code and keep my skills sharp and come up with interesting things about what do I want to go learn. And so for me right now, it's all like all the WebSocket stuff of using the software from Finance Singularity around how do we connect to all the different Twitch APIs and like pull that into an interface so we can do interesting things in OBS, or, you know, if somebody follows, it makes the lights blink, or if you cheer, it makes the lights blink, you know, stuff like that. So it's fun building out those kinds of you know, sorts of tools and tool sets and things like that. But understanding how they work is also really interesting too. Like what's actually going on under the hood and how do these things sort of all communicate? Like, is there a way that I could get OBS to just talk directly to Tau and not have like all these intermediate steps in between? You know, stuff like that. So I'm trying to engineer things in my mind of like, oh, it'd be cool if I could control this or that, you know, based on what's happening in Twitch chat, or, you know, like if somebody raids in, could I have it play like a video or something? You've all seen those kinds of things, and those tools exist. But for me, being able to sort of reproduce that tool gives me a better understanding and appreciation for what went into building it in the first place. And so for me, like, I didn't have to go build my own chatbot. There's plenty of chatbots out there, but I wanted to build my own because there were things that I wanted my chatbot to do that weren't possible with other chatbots. Like, you know, like these kinds of things. Like if you want a resume review, I can do like bang resume review and it'll like pull up this chat, but like asking a question anonymously, like nobody does that on a chatbot. So I built that myself because I wanted to give people a way to ask questions anonymously. Same thing with Discord. You can always DM me on Discord or on any of the socials. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. You can go find me there with the same username. And I'm happy to answer your question there, but I'm probably going to bring your question back to our Discord community and keep track of them in a channel there where I'm not going to share your name. I mean, you're asking anonymously, so I'm going to keep it anonymous. But just that way I can then bring that question back to others later to say, by the way, I had this interesting question about like, you know, like somebody asked me this week, like, once you get that developer job, like, what do you do with your first couple of paychecks? It's like, okay, well, you could celebrate yourself a little bit. I think that's a good way to spend part of that first paycheck, but you have to be careful. Like, don't go overboard, but like, do something to congratulate yourself that you got that first paycheck. You know, take care of your bills, take care of your financial responsibilities, and then from there, you know, savings, retirement, like all that kind of stuff. Like we don't really have pensions in the programming community, and so you kind of have to set up your own retirement fund. So those kinds of things would be important as well. So yeah, so Mike is still hanging out in chat with us. Says when it comes to developer advocacy, it does depend on the company. So White Panther does things at Netlify, I do things at Postman. Mike does developer relations at InfoSum. Every company is going to think about it slightly differently. Some of them are going to be more on the marketing side. Some are going to be more on the sales side. Some are going to be more on the community and the support side. No, you're totally welcome to keep hanging out with us while you're having dinner. You have to tell us what you're eating, though, because that's the important part. But yeah, it really does depend on the company, because every company is going to have a slightly different focus and different kind of focus. Like some teams only deal with enterprise customers and some teams only deal with non-enterprise customers. But at the end of the day, like they're paying our salaries, and our salaries are, you know, what they are in the tech industry. We need to kind of justify that cost to some degree, because I see developer relations usually as a cost loss to a company. Like we cost the company money. They're sending us around to travel and so on. And my very first developer relations job, they basically said, everything you do, we have to have 60 signups, because those 60 signups are going to convert to so many paid accounts and blah, blah, blah. And they were trying to like monetize. So everything we did, whether it was a blog post or a piece of code or a technical talk or a conference or whatever, they wanted a minimum kind of like tangible impact sort of check on it. And that was really hard to do. And it put a lot of pressure on our team to like worry more about the quality of what we were doing and worrying about like, how do we encourage people to get signed up and do all these things. So every company's a little bit different. But it's quite a fun job because it does blend a lot of technical experience along with the education side of it. Um, some companies are cool with people live streaming, some aren't. Some people, yeah, or some companies, they only want you on conference talks, and so you're constantly traveling. And for some people, they don't want to travel. So, is that a possibility? Sure. I mean, some companies don't require you to travel. Everybody's a little bit different on that. You got the depth buffer working in WebGL. Sweet. That's cool. Drift, did you ever find out why they asked the stuff on your application? Yes, I did. And I'm glad that you're here to ask and remind me of that. I literally just heard back from my HR rep on like late Friday afternoon about it. Let me go pull that up because I do want to read exactly what they sent me. So for history, people were, Driftwood was asking, like, why is it on applications that they ask about, do you have a disability? Do you have like a military background? Like, does the HR team actually look at that data, and could they bias against you by looking at that data, or do they look at it like after the fact? Like, do they ever see that data? And so I want to share what my HR rep told me about how we use that data. But I did hear from one other person about how they use that data, and so I'll correlate that. So they got back to me and said, sorry for the delay because I did nudge them a couple of times. There are general and broad responses. Companies may need to follow stronger and higher requirements if they are a government contractor company, meaning that they do business with the government. So that's one element to consider. And then a bunch of bullet points. Typically, US companies are legally required to provide the opportunity for candidates to disclose gender, race, veteran status, disabilities during the application process. Now, they have to have the opportunity to do it. Doesn't mean they have to. The data is optional, but the opportunity has to be available to candidates to fill out. Typically, and depending on the size of the company, the recruiters don't have access to this information, so they don't make a hiring decision based on the data provided, and that the fit or no fit or hire, no hire is purely based on skill. Some companies partner with diversity platforms that are helping them expand their diverse candidate pool with the intentions of hiring more diverse candidates by gender, sexual orientation, race, veteran status, etc. Depending on those platforms, the recruiters don't have access to the personal data either, but the idea is that the candidate pool becomes more diverse. And so it's used in a lot of ways, but typically HR teams are not looking at that data. They don't have access to that data. One other person that I spoke with about this said that companies have to disclose this information back to the government once you are hired. So they can say our company makeup is made up of so many people of these backgrounds and so many people with these disabilities or military status and so on, that they actually have to report that back to the government at some point, because then the government releases statistics about it. Whether that's true for all countries, I don't know. So 2 bits of information that I had for you on that. I did mean to bring it up. So I'm happy that you reminded me, because I did hear back, like I literally heard back. She sent me that message at 5:40 p.m. on Friday. And I'm like, oh, I got to remember to talk about that on Sunday, because I'd already done the Thursday stream that I couldn't have brought it up. So again, just kind of recapping, the question was, why do companies ask that kind of questions when we're not typically allowed to ask those questions in the interview? Like, are you married? Do you have kids? Do you have a military background? Do you have disabilities? Like, we're not allowed to ask those questions because we don't want to bias against you, or for a particular type of person. Like, if I've got a military background and I only want to hire people with a military background, those are biases that I'm going to have, whether they're conscious or unconscious. As much as possible, we need that interview process to be as unbiased as possible. And so the question raised by Driftwood was, why do they ask this information then? Like, does it ever get viewed and used as part of the hiring? And from what I heard from my HR person is it's used after the fact. Or if your company is using a third-party company specifically around the idea of diversity, which our company does, that other company has access to that data, but our recruiters don't. And so our recruiters don't have visibility into that. We only hire based on the skill of the person, and it's up to this other group then to help make sure that we have a diverse pool of candidates. Every company is going to be a little bit different though, but from what this person was saying is like the data is optional, but the opportunity has to be available for the candidate to fill it out. Whether or not they choose to fill it out is different, but it is not, at least in our company's case, it's not viewable by our HR team. I don't know if that's going to be true all the time, so I don't have a good answer for you there. I would like to keep asking this question to people in HR and say, like, at what point do you have access to this data, or at what point do you view this data as far as like making decisions, about whether to interview somebody or whether to hire somebody? Because I think it's important to know this stuff. I think that it was a fantastic question. I really appreciate that you raised that question, because I get to go learn stuff with that. Now, at the time, I had that presumption around, like, they probably use it, to make sure that there's diversity happening. But it sounds like unless your company is working with these other companies, that would have access to that data to go say, okay, based on the 50 people that you found, here's a list of 10 that we think that you should talk to, and they're making sure that there are percentages of diversity or something in there. So yeah, I really appreciate questions like that, because then I get to go learn things, and then we all get to learn things. So yeah, definitely keep those kinds of questions coming. If you've got questions about interview prep or career advancement, or like even things like that, like how do we even find out about that kind of stuff? Like that how do we even know that a company cares about that stuff? Or to what depth they care about it? I think that's important for sure. It's good to know these things. I've always wondered. Yeah, I've wondered too. Like even going through that job hunt for me back in December, I'm like, do I fill this stuff out? Do I not fill it out? Like, I'm a white guy in tech, but like, should I say that I've had certain surgeries or not? Like, is it really a disability? Like, I had a shoulder surgery, and so I kind of had a disability for a little while. It's better now, but at the time, is it treated as a long-term disability, a short-term disability? Like, what kind of disability are you asking me about? Um, that kind of stuff. It's good to know that stuff for sure. Alrighty, well, let's go see who's online. Mayan Wolf's online. I think we'll go right into her. Although CM Griffing's here. No, actually, we rated into CM Griffing the other day. Who else is on? Doing maker stuff. Yeah, I think we'll go right into Mayan Wolf and see what they're up to with 100 devs over there. Awesome. Well, thanks for hanging out, everybody. We'll go right over there, make some noise in chat when you get over there. Thanks for hanging out today. Big thank you again to Mike, if you're around in chat. Thanks again, Mike, for hanging out with us today and sharing your ideas and perspectives. We'll have someone else new on the stream next Sunday. This Thursday, I don't think we have someone on the stream, or we do have someone on the stream. Let me go find that out before I go do that raid. techinterview.guide/streaming. I think we do have somebody this Thursday. On the 14th. No, 18th. Yeah, Till Carlos. So Till kind of goes back and forth between somewhere in Vietnam. And I think they're currently in Vietnam. So we're going to hear from someone else on Thursday on the stream. Cool. We'll catch you over in Mayan Wolf's channel. Go make some noise and chat over there, and we'll see you all on Thursday with another guest. Cheers, everybody.